Yo, what is going on, everybody? And welcome to Storm the Field with DJ. I am DJ, and we had a pretty crazy week 3 of the college football season. So, let's get into this week 3 recap. So, the first game we talked about last week was Georgia at Tennessee, and this was a hell of a game. Georgia ended up coming back from, I believe, 21-7 down. They came back to win this game in overtime after a missed field goal by Tennessee. It was a hell of a game. I believe both teams played really good football. And at the end of the day, it was just Georgia's experience, because Tennessee's kicker was a first-time kicker in that type of scenario. Last-minute winner against a top-ranked opponent. So they didn't have that experience, that kicker, that would have probably won them that game. That kicker had it wide right on the winning kick. And, yeah, both quarterbacks played pretty well this game. Gunnar Stockton was 23 for 31 for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Joey Aguilar was 24 of 36 for 371 yards, 4 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. Both teams rushed the ball decently well, Nate Frazier being the leading running back for Georgia with the most carries at 14 and the most yards at 73. Gunnar Stockton had a decent rushing game with 13 carries on 38 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. And Josh McCray, he had 7 carries for 17 yards, but 2 touchdowns on the ground for him. On the Tennessee side, Star Thompson was their number 1 back, at least in the yardage game. 9 carries for 60 yards. He did not have a touchdown. He had a decent breakaway run for 27 yards. Deshaun Bishop led the way in carries with 15 carries for 54 yards. But Joey Aguilar, also 5 carries, lost 8 yards on them, but he did have a rushing touchdown in this game. The receiving side, Colby Young, leading receiver for the Bulldogs. Zachariah Branch follows that, and then followed by London Humphreys. On the Tennessee side, Chris Brazel. My God, this guy is looking insane. He had 6 receptions, 177 yards, and 3 touchdowns in this game, his longest being a 72-yard touchdown. Braylon Staley also had a pretty good game, as well as Mike Matthews. They did not lose a single fumble, the Vols. They fumbled the ball twice, but did not lose possession on either of those two, while Gunnar Stockton did end up losing 1. So, I mean, this was a very good game. I wouldn't say it's a very defensive game, I mean, looking at the score, but it was a very close game. And it was a very interesting game to see how these two teams played in this scenario. I think both teams played very well. I think Georgia just had the better experience on this game, and that's what helped them win it. Let's get into the next matchup. Now, the next game I'm going to talk about is the LSU Tigers taking on the Florida Gators. LSU ended up coming out on top on this one, 20-30. Some thoughts I had about this game. This game was a very close game. Florida should have won this game. As you can see in this stat line, DJ Lagway 33 of 49 for 287 yards, a touchdown. He had 5 different interceptions in this game, including a pick 6, which really put the game away in the third quarter. They needed to play better than that, and they did not at all. They really struggled against that LSU defense. LSU is looking like a true contender, but it's looking like they have some weaknesses. They played pretty well against Florida's offense, but weren't really able to score on Florida's defense. Again, they did have a defensive touchdown, so they had 1 offensive touchdown all game. That was a passing touchdown to Xavier Thomas. Not a single touchdown on the ground or any other offensive touchdowns for the LSU Tigers. So, and you expect against a team like the Gators that are currently sitting at 1-2 to have a better game than that, but honestly, all that matters is you get the win. It's a rivalry game, so, there's a little bit extra to that. But, I don't know. This game didn't show a lot for me. I honestly had more interest in what happened in the Vanderbilt South Carolina game and the Georgia Tech Clemson game than this game. I thought this was going to be one of the bigger games of the week. Now, let's get into the final game before we get into the game between the Ducks and Northwestern and Miami and USF. Obviously, the final game we want to talk about is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish taking on the Texas A&M Aggies. Texas A&M comes out on top and performs the upset, and Notre Dame is now at 0-2. I am so happy. I hate the Irish, so this is great for me. I love that the Irish are starting the season 0-2. They should be out of the top 10 for sure. I believe in the new AP poll they may be out of the top 25 at 0-2. CJ Carr had a decent game, 20 of 32, 93 yards, and a touchdown and interception. Marcel Reed, 17 of 37, 360 yards, 2 touchdowns and interception. Le'Veon Moss was a big tool for the Texas A&M team. 20 carries for 81 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground for him. Jadarian Price, 12 carries for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jeremiah Love, 23 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. Really didn't see insane numbers out of Jeremiah Love this season so far in his first 2 games. Mario Craver had an outstanding game for Texas A&M. 7 receptions for 207 yards. That's over almost 30 yards a catch. He also had a good touchdown grab. Casey Concepcion had 4 receptions for 82 yards. Also 20 yards per catch. Ruben Owens, 1 catch for 24. Also over 20 yards. And then Nick Borkischer, their tight end, had a touchdown on his only catch, which was an 11-yard gain. Not really many turnovers in this game, 1 per team. So this really came down to who had the better rushing attack, and it ended up being, honestly, Texas A&M. They were more consistent on their run game than Notre Dame was, and that's honestly what gave them the big win. And obviously, Mario Craver played an insane role in this game. You don't get 207 yards just by doing nothing. He went off in this game. On 7 receptions, having 200 yards is insane. He was a very big piece to this victory for Texas A&M. I really do think that he is going to be a very good receiver in the future for whichever team he plays for next. And yeah, now let's get into the Ducks. So this week the Ducks traveled over to Northwestern to take on the Northwestern Wildcats, and they ended up winning this game 34-14. Not a bad margin of victory by any means. I would have liked to see a slightly bigger one, but it's okay. Dante Moore was 16 of 20 for 178 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Preston Stone, 11 for 21, 135 yards and 2 interceptions. On the ground, Oregon, Derry Hill, 5 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown, including a 66-yard run. Jalen Lamar, 11 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Davison, 4 carries for 8 yards and a touchdown. And we really didn't see anything out of Noah Whittington this week. Mekhi Hughes also only got 1 touch again. So still do not know why we're not using Mekhi Hughes. On the receiving side, of course, Malik Benson and DeCorian Moore up there in the receiving leaders. Kenny Sadiq, 2 carries for 35 yards and a touchdown. Also, very good game for him. Really want to see him used more still. Again, defensive side, we look at this. Mateo had a sack. Trioti and Bear Alexander shared the sack. We had 2 sacks total and 4 TFLs total. We like some more there. On our 2 interceptions, 1 by Bryce Betcher and 1 by Jerry Mixon. 36 yards on the return and 31 yards on the return, respectively. And then Gary Bryant Jr. had decent punt returns, only 1 for 9 yards. Atticus Sappington, good kicking. And Ferguson Reynolds, pretty good punting. This was not the strongest showing for Oregon, especially after the game last week against Oklahoma State. But For a Big Ten opponent, it is a pretty good game. 24-point margin of victory. However, the Ducks did drop to number 6 in the country this week as Georgia and Miami have jumped them. Speaking of Miami, let's get into the Canes. Now this week, the Canes put belt to ass against the USF Bulls. They ended up winning this game 49-12. Byron Brown was 20 of 36 for 274 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Carson Beck, 23 of 28 for 340 yards, 3 touchdowns, and his first 2 interceptions of the season. On the ground, Mark Fletcher had an insane game. 16 carries for 120 yards. By far, longest rusher of the game. He also had 2 touchdowns. Carson Beck also had a rushing touchdown on the ground. And Gerard Pringle, who is probably my new favorite Miami Hurricanes player just for his last name, had 5 carries for 12 yards and also a touchdown run. On the receiving side, Joshua Moore was very good on the receiving end, and Shamar Brown also had a 1-yard touchdown grab. We saw a lot of Keelan Marion this week, and Malachi Toney, of course. Each of them having 6 receptions. Keelan having 81 yards on those, and Malachi Toney having 66. Tony Johnson also got some decent targets and yardage on 2 receptions on 64 yards. And CJ Daniels had 4 receptions for 56 yards. I think both of these teams played well on the receiving side, especially USF, considering this Miami defense being a lot stronger than it was last year. Chaz Nimrod, 4 receptions for 128 yards. Wyatt Sullivan, 5 receptions for 55 yards. Keyshawn Singleton, 2 receptions for 39 yards. Christian Neptune, 7 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown. And they really spread the ball decently well on the receiving side. Again, Miami did end up recovering a fumble by Byron Brown. And Miami had 2 sacks all game. It was not a defensive... We were not necessarily putting all the pressure on Byron Brown that we should have, but we still played well. Again, two sacks and 4 TFLs is not bad. Bryce Fitzgerald also had a good interception, and Carter Davis and Brett Auburn were both used to kick the extra points. And Dylan Joyce had 3 very good punts, 2 ending up inside the red zone. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching this Week 3 recap of the college football season. We'll be back next week to recap Week 4. And yeah, I bleed orange and green and yellow. Daytime out.